I handed my slick son-in-law the keys to my finances so I could focus on surviving a severe heart condition. His response? He quietly canceled my life-saving health insurance to fund his double life. But I had a $5 million trump card, and my revenge would rewrite our entire family tree. I built my life with my own two hands. For 40 years, I ran a commercial roofing company, weathering economic crashes, brutal labor shortages, and the sudden, devastating loss of my wife to cancer. Everything I did, every drop of sweat I poured into that business, was for one person, my daughter, Emily. She was the absolute light of my life, a brilliant, compassionate woman who unfortunately had a blind spot the size of a freight train when it came to men. That blind spot's name was Brandon. Brandon was an investment banker. He wore suits that cost more than my first car, wore his hair slicked back, and smiled with entirely too many teeth. From the day Emily brought him home, my gut screamed that he was a shark, but Emily was smitten. When they married, I smiled, paid for the lavish wedding, and kept my reservations entirely to myself. A father's job is to protect his child, but sometimes that means letting them make their own choices while standing by with a safety net. 5 years into their marriage, my health collapsed. My heart, which had endured decades of stress and grief, began to fail. The diagnosis was severe, congestive heart failure, complicated by a rare valve defect. The prognosis wasn't an immediate death sentence, but keeping me alive required an intense, grueling regimen of experimental medications, regular specialist visits, and a premium, top-tier private health insurance policy that cost upwards of $4,000 a month. Knowing my time was limited and my energy fading, I made a decision that would become the biggest regret of my life. I sold my roofing company for a sizable sum. I set aside $5 million in an ironclad will meant solely for Emily upon my passing. Then, I took the remaining liquid cash, about $800,000, and put it into a revocable trust meant to cover my living expenses, my exorbitant medical premiums, and the cost of building a custom in-law suite on Emily and Brandon's sprawling property. Since I was exhausted from the disease and Brandon was a financial expert, I gave him the managerial reins to that specific trust. The instructions were simple: pay the insurance premiums, handle my medical bills, and manage the day-to-day accounting. For the first year, everything seemed fine. I lived quietly in the guest house, enjoying dinners with Emily and trying to ignore Brandon's constant bragging about his stock market wins. But then, the fatigue started coming back. My chest felt tighter. I needed my prescription refilled, a specialized cocktail of blood thinners and cardiac support drugs that kept fluid out of my lungs. I drove myself to the pharmacy on a dreary Tuesday afternoon. I was out of breath, just walking from the parking lot to the counter. "Henry, good to see you," the pharmacist, an older woman named Nancy, who had known me for years, said with a warm smile. But when she scanned my card, her smile faltered. She typed something into her keyboard, frowning deeply. "Henry, your card is coming up as declined. It says the policy was terminated due to non-payment." I gripped the edge of the counter, my heart doing a terrifying flutter. "That's impossible, Nancy. It's on an auto-pay through my son-in-law's firm. Run it again." She ran it again. She even called the provider. After 20 minutes of excruciating waiting, she gave me the devastating news. The premiums hadn't been paid in 5 months. The grace period was long gone. My policy was dead. To pay out of pocket for the medication I needed just to survive, the month would cost nearly $12,000. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I paid for a 1-week emergency supply using my personal emergency credit card, my hands shaking so badly I could barely sign the receipt. When I got back to the house, I didn't go to my suite. I marched straight into the main house. Brandon was sitting at the kitchen island, typing on his laptop and sipping an espresso. "Brandon," I gasped, leaning against the doorframe. My insurance was canceled. They said it hasn't been paid in 5 months. What the hell is going on? They said it hasn't been paid in 5 months. He didn't even flinch. He just slowly closed his laptop and gave me a patronizing, pitying look. Henry, calm down. It's bad for your blood pressure. There was an administrative glitch with the trust account. The underwriters are being difficult about your new risk bracket. I'm restructuring some of the liquid assets to get a better return, and the auto-pay lapsed. I'll make a few calls tomorrow. A glitch? I demanded, my voice rising. I could have died, Brandon. I need those pills to breathe. And you'll get them, he replied smoothly, standing up and checking his gold watch. Just let me handle the money, Henry. That's what you hired me for. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a client dinner. He walked out the front door. I watched through the window as he pressed a button on his keys. The headlights of a brand new midnight blue Porsche Panamera flashed in the driveway, a car that cost well over $130,000. He had told Emily it was a company lease bonus, but looking at the gleam of the paint and remembering the empty void of my insurance account, a terrifying, sickening realization washed over me. Brandon wasn't restructuring my assets. He was draining them. He had canceled my life-saving insurance to save cash, calculating that if I died faster, he and Emily would inherit the $5 million estate sooner. He was literally trading my life expectancy for leather seats and luxury. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. When you spend 40 years walking on high, dangerous roofs, you learn that panic kills you. Instead, my anger turned completely ice cold. I went back to my guest house, locked the door, and opened my own laptop. The next morning, while Brandon was at work and Emily was at her architectural firm, I made a phone call to my oldest friend, Harrison. Harrison was a ruthless estate lawyer who had helped me navigate the legal minefields of the construction business. I need you to audit the trust I set up, I told him, skipping the pleasantries. I think Brandon is stealing from me, and I think he's trying to let me die. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Bring me everything you have, bank statements, the original trust agreement, whatever mail you can intercept. I'll put my best forensic accountant on it. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the part of the frail, ignorant, dying father perfectly. I smiled at dinners. I nodded when Brandon gave me vague, dismissive updates about fixing the insurance issue, which he never did. I was quietly paying out of pocket, draining my own tiny secret emergency stash. Then Harrison called me into his office. The look on his face was grim. You were right, Henry, but it's worse than you thought, Harrison said, sliding a thick manila folder across his mahogany desk. Brandon has completely drained the liquid trust. There's barely $5,000 left in it. He's been funneling the money through a series of dummy LLCs. Where did it go? I asked, my chest tightening. Cars? Gambling? Bad investments? Harrison sighed heavily. Some of it went to the Porsche, but the bulk of it, Henry, I had to hire a private investigator to track the LLC payouts. You need to look at these photos. I opened the folder. Inside were a dozen high-resolution surveillance photographs. The first photo showed Brandon standing on the porch of a beautiful, modest suburban home about 40 miles away in a neighboring town. The second photo showed him kissing a woman. She was beautiful, with dark curly hair, wearing blue hospital scrubs. The third photo made my heart completely stop. It was Brandon, lifting a little boy into the air. The boy looked to be about 5 years old. He had Brandon's jawline and my daughter's husband's eyes. Her name is Sophia, Harrison explained softly, seeing the color drain from my face. She's a pediatric nurse. The boy's name is Leo. He just turned 5. Henry. Brandon bought that house in cash, using your medical funds. He's been maintaining 2 separate households. I felt physically ill. My mind raced back to Emily, my beautiful, brilliant daughter, who had spent the last 3 years crying on my shoulder because she and Brandon were struggling with infertility. She blamed herself. She underwent agonizing IVF treatments, carrying the heavy burden of failure, all while the man sleeping next to her already had a thriving son tucked away in another zip code. "Does Sophia know?" I rasped out, gripping the arms of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. "Is she in on it?" "According to Mitchell, our PI, no," Harrison said. Mitchell did some deep digging. Sophia thinks Brandon is an international logistics consultant who travels heavily for work. She has no social media footprint, lives a very quiet life, and works agonizingly long shifts at the children's hospital. From all accounts, she thinks she's in a committed, long-term relationship with a man who is just a workaholic. She has no idea Emily exists. She certainly has no idea the house she lives in was paid for with stolen money from a dying man. The sheer magnitude of Brandon's sociopathy was staggering. He wasn't just a greedy son-in-law. He was a parasite. He was slowly killing me by withholding my medical care, watching my daughter torture herself over infertility, and deceiving a hard-working nurse, all so he could play king of 2 castles. "He's waiting for me to die," I said, the reality finally settling in my bones. Once my heart gives out, Emily inherits the $5 million. He knows Emily doesn't look closely at the finances. He would slowly siphon that off too, living like a king with his secret family, while my daughter remains absolutely clueless. "We can go to the police right now, Henry," Harrison urged, leaning forward. "This is wire fraud, elder abuse, embezzlement. We can have him arrested by dinner time." "No." The word left my mouth before I even thought about it. Harrison looked at me, shocked. "If we blow this up right now," I explained, my voice chillingly calm, "Emily's world shatters instantly. She finds out her husband is a thief, a liar, and has a secret child, all on the same day. It would break her. Worse, the legal battle over the assets would take years. Brandon is slick. He'll hide behind the LLCs, claim I authorized the expenditures, drag it out in court. He might even try to take half of Emily's current assets in a messy divorce." "So what do you want to do?" Harrison asked. I looked down at the photo of little Leo. The boy was innocent. He didn't ask to be born into a web of lies, and Sophia, by all accounts, was just a victim of a master manipulator, much like my daughter. "I want to ruin him," I said. "I want to strip him of his pride, his money, and his secrets. But I'm going to do it in a way that guarantees Emily is protected forever and leaves him with absolutely nothing, not a single dime." I pulled out a notepad from my jacket. "First, Harrison, we are going to completely restructure the $5 million will. Brandon expects it to go straight to Emily, where he can reach it. We are changing that today." I outlined a plan so airtight, so deeply vindictive yet structurally bulletproof, that by the end of it, Harrison was staring at me with a mix of awe and slight terror. "It's brilliant," Harrison admitted, wiping his glasses. "But Henry, you need to be careful. The stress of this, your heart." "My heart has never beaten clearer," I lied. The truth was, my chest was screaming in agony. The lack of proper medication was taking its toll, and my breathing was getting shallower every day. But I had a mission now. I couldn't afford to die. Not yet. The next step required a personal touch. I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with on the other side of Brandon's life. 2 days later, I rented a nondescript sedan, not wanting Brandon to somehow recognize my truck, and drove to the neighboring town. I parked across the street from a small community park located a few blocks from the address Harrison had given me. At exactly 3 p.m., just like the PI's notes predicted, A woman with dark curls walked into the park, holding the hand of a little boy in a dinosaur t-shirt. I took a deep breath, clutching a cane I had started using for stability, and slowly walked over to a park bench near the sandbox. As little Leo played, I accidentally dropped my cane. Sophia immediately rushed over. "Oh, let me help you with that, sir," she said, her voice warm and genuinely kind. She picked it up and handed it back to me. "Thank you, my dear," I smiled, looking into her eyes. There was no deceit there, just exhaustion. My hands aren't what they used to be. "It's no trouble at all," she smiled, sitting on the opposite end of the bench to watch her son. We struck up a conversation. I introduced myself as an old retired contractor, just enjoying the weather. I asked her about her life. Over the next hour, she told me everything without realizing she was handing me the final pieces of the puzzle. She talked about her grueling shifts at the hospital. She talked about how hard it was raising a son mostly alone because her partner, Brandon, traveled so much for his consulting firm. "He's a good provider," she said softly, though there was a hint of sadness in her voice. "But Leo misses him. He's only home a few days a month." "It's hard on a child," I agreed gently. "Are you two married?" She blushed slightly, looking down. "No. We've been together 6 years, but his family is very complicated. He comes from old money, very strict. They don't approve of him dating a working-class nurse. So, we keep things quiet, for Leo's sake. Old money, strict family." The lies Brandon spun were sickeningly elaborate. I felt a surge of protective anger, not just for Emily, but for this woman and her child, who were being kept in a cage of deception. "Well," I said, standing up with a groan, leaning heavily on my cane, "you seem like a wonderful mother. I'm sure things will work out exactly the way they are supposed to." "Thank you," she smiled. "Have a good day, sir." I walked back to my rental car, my mind completely made up. The pieces were all on the board. Brandon thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers. He thought I was just a dying old roofer who didn't understand finance. He was about to learn that you don't survive 40 years in the commercial roofing business without knowing exactly how to dismantle a structure from the top down, dropping the roof right on the heads of the rats inside. I drove home, pulled out my phone, and sent a text to Harrison. "Execute Phase 1. Let the games begin." Phase 1 began with a quiet, methodical restructuring of my entire financial existence. Harrison and I spent 3 grueling days locked in his office, drafting documents that would serve as both a shield for my daughter and a guillotine for my son-in-law. The original will, which left $5 million in a lump sum to Emily, was entirely scrapped. Brandon had spent years isolating Emily from their finances, convincing her that his expertise meant she never needed to look at a bank statement. If she inherited a massive lump sum, he would simply roll it into his fraudulent LLCs and bleed it dry. To prevent this, Harrison established an ironclad, irrevocable trust specifically for Emily. The terms were brutally strict. Emily would receive a generous monthly stipend for the rest of her life, but the principal could never be touched, leveraged, or borrowed against by any spouse, current or future. Brandon couldn't get his manicured hands on a single penny of it. But I didn't stop there. I took the remaining $3 million of my liquid wealth money Brandon assumed was safely waiting to be inherited and established a completely separate trust. This was the trump card. This trust was designated entirely for the benefit of Leo, the innocent 5-year-old boy, and his mother, Sophia. However, there was a deeply specific contingency built into this inheritance. To access the funds, Sophia had to legally sever all ties with Brandon, and Brandon had to be permanently stripped of any custodial rights or access to the money. If Brandon so much as attempted to contest it, a poison pill clause would immediately trigger a full forensic audit of his dummy LLCs, releasing the findings directly to the IRS and the FBI. I was building a financial bomb, and Brandon was sitting right on top of it, eagerly checking his watch, waiting for me to die. To ensure the trap was fully set, I needed to play the final months of my life to perfection. I stopped confronting Brandon about the insurance. I quietly drained my own hidden retirement accounts to pay for my life-saving medications out of pocket, enduring the crushing physical toll of my failing heart in absolute silence. At family dinners, I was the picture of a frail, fading old man. I would watch Brandon pour expensive wine, listening to him complain about the stress of the market, while Emily rubbed his shoulders, completely unaware that the man she loved was a hollowed-out fraud. Every time Brandon looked at me, I could see the cold, calculating greed in his eyes. He thought he had won. He thought he had successfully expedited my demise. One rainy evening in late October, my lungs felt heavier than usual. The fluid buildup was becoming unmanageable, and the medication was losing its effectiveness. I knew my time was down to days, perhaps hours. I called Harrison and asked him to come to my guest house with a video camera. Sitting in my favorite leather armchair, wearing my best suit, I looked directly into the camera lens and recorded my final message. I laid out every single truth. I spoke to Emily with all the love a father could muster, apologizing for the pain the video would cause her, but assuring her it was the only way to save her life. I detailed Brandon's embezzlement, the canceled insurance, the secret house, and the existence of Sophia and Leo. I left nothing to the imagination. 3 days later, my heart finally gave out. I passed away quietly in my sleep. According to Harrison, Emily was absolutely devastated. She wept for days, organizing a beautiful funeral that celebrated my 40 years of hard work. Brandon, playing the part of the grieving, supportive husband, stood by her side in a custom-tailored black suit, accepting condolences and shaking hands. He even gave a tearful eulogy about how much I meant to him, calling me a mentor and a father figure. He was practically measuring the drapes for his new yacht. He assumed the waiting game was finally over. He assumed the $5 million was officially his to control. He had absolutely no idea that the real game was only just beginning. 2 weeks after we laid my body to rest in the family plot, Harrison summoned Emily and Brandon to his downtown law office for the formal reading of the will. When they arrived and took their seats in the plush leather chairs of the conference room, Brandon looked relaxed, casually checking his phone and offering Emily a comforting, patronizing pat on the knee. But his smug demeanor shattered the moment the heavy oak door opened, and a bewildered woman walked in, holding the hand of a 5-year-old boy. It was Sophia and Leo. Emily looked up, confused. "Harrison, who are these people? Is there another appointment?" Brandon's face drained of all color. The tan he had acquired from his weekend golf trips vanished, replaced by an ashen, sickly white. He dropped his phone on the mahogany table with a loud clatter. What is she doing here?" he stammered, his eyes darting frantically toward the door, as if calculating an escape route. Sophia looked equally confused, her eyes widening as she recognized Brandon sitting next to another woman. "Brandon, what is going on?" The lawyer said, "I was named in a patient's will." "Henry, the old man from the park?" Harrison stood at the head of the table, his expression carved from stone. "Please, take a seat, Sophia. Everything will be explained momentarily." "Brandon, who is this?" Emily asked, her voice trembling as she noticed the absolute panic radiating from her husband. She looked at little Leo, then back at Brandon, the horrifying familial resemblance hitting her like a physical blow. "Emily, don't listen to him. This is a mistake. We need to leave." Brandon panicked, grabbing Emily's arm. "Sit down, Brandon," Harrison commanded, his voice echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Or I will have security physically restrain you until the reading is concluded." Brandon slumped back in his chair, sweating profusely. Harrison didn't hand out stacks of paper. Instead, he picked up a remote control and turned on the large flat-screen television mounted on the wall. Henry requested that his final will and testament be delivered personally, Harrison stated, pressing play. My face appeared on the screen. Emily gasped, covering her mouth with her hands, tears instantly springing to her eyes. "Hello, Emily," my recorded voice filled the room. "If you are watching this, my heart has finally taken its last beat. I love you more than words can express, and everything I have done to protect you. I am so sorry for the pain you are about to experience." On screen, I took a deep breath, and the warmth in my eyes shifted to cold steel as I looked directly at the camera. "Brandon, you thought you were the smartest man in the room. You thought I was just an ignorant old roofer who wouldn't notice when you canceled my life-saving health insurance to pad your own pockets." Emily let out a choked sob, turning to stare at Brandon in absolute horror. Brandon buried his face in his hands, trembling. "You embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from my medical trust," the video continued, mercilessly laying out the evidence. "You used the money meant to keep me alive to fund a secret life." Emily, the woman sitting in this room is Sophia. The boy is Leo. Brandon has maintained a separate household with them for the last 6 years. He bought their home with stolen money. The room erupted. Sophia cried out, pulling Leo close to her chest, her entire reality shattering as she realized the man she loved was not an international consultant, but a married, thieving fraud. Emily didn't scream. She didn't yell. She just stared at Brandon with a look of absolute chilling disgust, moving her chair away from him as if he were carrying a plague. "Emily, my darling," my voice softened on the screen. "Your financial future is secure. I have placed $2 million in a blind, irrevocable trust for you. Brandon cannot touch a single cent of it. Furthermore, Harrison has prepared divorce filings on your behalf, along with a mountain of forensic financial evidence that will ensure Brandon leaves the marriage with nothing but the clothes on his back." I then addressed Sophia. "Sophia, we met in the park. You are a good mother and a victim of this man's pathological lies. I have left the remaining $3 million of my estate in a trust for Leo, ensuring his education and your financial freedom. However, this trust is completely inaccessible as long as Brandon is in your lives. To claim it, he must be legally severed from your family entirely." The video concluded with one final crushing blow directed at my son-in-law. "I told you once, Brandon, that you don't survive 40 years on a roof without knowing how to tear down a structure. I built this trap, and you walked right into it. You traded my life for cash. Now, you have no money, no wife, no secret family, and no future. You are utterly ruined." The screen faded to black. The silence in the conference room was deafening, broken only by Sophia's quiet weeping. Emily stood up slowly. She took off her diamond wedding ring, walked over to where Brandon sat frozen in shock, and dropped the ring directly into his lap. "I never want to see your face again," Emily whispered, her voice colder than ice. She turned to Harrison. "File the papers." She then did something that made me prouder than anything else in my life. She walked over to Sophia, placed a gentle hand on the crying woman's shoulder, and offered her a sad, knowing smile. Two women, united by the ultimate betrayal, finding a strange solace in the wreckage. In the aftermath, my plan executed flawlessly. Emily divorced Brandon, taking the house and leaving him drowning in legal fees. Sophia took the trust money, moved across the country with Leo, and built a beautiful new life far away from Brandon's toxic shadow. As for Brandon, without my wealth to hide behind, the forensic evidence of his embezzlement from my trust reached his investment firm. He was fired instantly, stripped of his licenses, and investigated for federal wire fraud. He lost his Porsche. He lost his status. He was left with absolutely nothing, living in a cheap rented room, haunted by the ghost of the father-in-law he tried to discard. I may have lost my life to a failing heart, but in the end, I made sure the man who tried to bury me was the one who truly lost everything. Did Henry's ultimate revenge go too far? Or did Brandon get exactly what he deserved for his ultimate betrayal? Family secrets can destroy lives, but Henry proved that a father's love will always find a way to protect his daughter from beyond the grave. If you were shocked by this insane story of deception, greed, and brilliant karma, smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more unbelievable real-life drama.